softball team while majoring in studio art and holding an apprenticeship at Reebok in their design department. After graduating, Elisabeth designed footwear for Puma. In 2002, she competed in the second season of Survivor, the Australian Outback, outlasting her way to the Final Four. For the next decade, she co-hosted the daytime talk show The View on ABC. In 2013, Elisabeth joined the morning news broadcast with Fox News channel Fox and Friends, where she served as co-host for 2 years. As a gluten-free celiac, Elisabeth has written The G-Free Diet and Deliciously G-Free, both about her journey cooking and living joyfully with celiac disease. Her 2019 release, Point of View, is a book focused on God's lens and the lessons she has learned the hard way. Her recent best-selling children's book, Flashlight Night, tells a story about the adventure of trusting God in the dark. Elisabeth has been a member of Team RWB, a veterans nonprofit, since its founding year, and currently sits on the advisory board of the Positivity Project. She is married to former NFL quarterback and current ESPN analyst Tim Hasselbeck, and they have 3 children, Grace, Taylor, and Isaiah. And she says, I'm most proud of being Tim's wife and mom to our children. Please join me in welcoming Elisabeth Hasselbeck.
It is such an honor to be here with all of you. Mr. Gioia, thank you for that introduction. I am most proud of being wife to Tim and mom to our 3 children. It's what gives me the most fulfillment. And to look out and see all of you right from the start, just celebrating time together, the bond is so real. I'm only 2 years in, but this gives me so much more to look forward to because our boys share a thread of a very specific, unique, awesome rhythm here at Montgomery Bell Academy. I don't know if anyone was with me because my back was to all of you, but my heart was thumping as the Headmaster singers shared those words in song. I had tears in my eyes. I just got my composure, I think, after a few sips and smiles with Farrell Mason and Mr. Gioia here. That was so moving, so I want to thank those boys individually. I'd love to be able to write them a letter. That touched me in a way I was not expecting today, but that was so beautifully sung. We have a rising 7th grader and 9th grader next year, so when Brad asked me to speak here, I thought, well, I feel it would be much more appropriate to just have you all come up to the microphone and I sit with a notebook and just take notes of advice that you have for me. I have a lot to learn. Feel free to jot down any advice you have for me or send it. I'm in the directory. Once you hear this talk today, you will understand I need a lot of guidance. Contenting, as you'll see on a little sticker that I put on your places, is a word that came to me. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to make up a word here at this school, but maybe I can get a special exemption. Is the present state of camping out in the good, in both mind and heart. And I'm personally on an adventure to discover how we can be content in all circumstances, both in times of trial and triumph. Ironically, we just heard that in the song. Part of this journey involves interviewing wise individuals who have found pathways to contenting in all things that amaze me. Contenting is easy when we share an afternoon like this with kind-hearted company and talents of song and tables set prepared by a wonderful team here led by Susan, and with fellow moms of young men who have walked the same halls and grown under this amazing character-building school home and its leadership. Contenting in our mistakes and hard times, well, that is another story. With the last day of school upon us, I'm immediately brought back to the first day of school, as I'm sure you all are. It sort of tesseracts those 2 points together in time. For me, I personally love off-script, seeing the presidential photo on the first day and we're all battling to try to not get a mullet on their head by the last day. I'm sure you recall getting the blazer or finding the blazer, pants that are not too short, tying the tie, making sure their hair is compliant, and most importantly, reassuring them that they have what it takes for the year ahead. Now, while the last day of school is surely celebrated, the first day of school is undoubtedly sacred. I remember living in New York City in 2008, and our oldest child, Grace, who is now 17 years old, set out to embark on her educational journey. Her ruffle socks were laid out, her monogram dress, and her lunchbox set next to the biggest bow I can find. "It's a big day," I told Grace. "Let's go to the park to celebrate the last day of summer." We packed up and set out on foot to the Diana Ross playground, her favorite, the perfect place to celebrate the eve of our first child's first day of school. After we had enjoyed the swings, the slides, the tunnels, and a snack, my phone rang, and then it rang again. "Miss Hasselbeck?" "Yes, this is Elisabeth," I replied. "Hello, this is such and such a school," not to be named. "We are calling to confirm that Grace will be joining us this year for school." "Oh, yes," I confirmed. "We are so excited for her first day tomorrow. Is there anything else I need to know?" There was a deadening pause. Then, more terrible silence, followed by these words. "Ms. Hasselbeck, today was the first day of school." Grace has missed her first day of school. I think my knees still go a little shaky when I remember that. At this point, I'm pretty sure I let out a scream in Central Park that likely alerted the NYPD and put them on high alert. But the only thing louder than that scream that I let out outside in Central Park was the deep internal scream of shame on the inside. What kind of mom misses the first day of school for her firstborn child? Can I get a show of hands? Anyone miss the first day of school? No. Who does such a thing? And see, Grace didn't miss her first day of school. I missed her first day of school. A whopping dose of mom guilt swept right over me. There was no contenting to be found, only condemnation. As an aside, Mr. Gioia, am I fired from the Mothers Club or Spaghetti Supper volunteering? Because I really like being a part of that, and I promise I have not yet missed a first day of school because the kids remind me a lot now. And just to make me giggle, when they get in the car, they say, "Are you sure it's the first day of school?" And a little bit of me wonders, maybe it's not. So began a massive mission to mompensate. That is, by my definition, a desperate attempt by a mother to begin overcompensating for missing or messing something up by making cookies, buying a toy, or a brand new pack of candy. Please raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. That would make me feel better. See, I remember stopping for an extra special last day of summer ice cream for Grace. The next day, I got her dressed, kissed her cheeks, adjusted her bow, and walked her into the building, taking a picture for her first day of school. As we got to the classroom, I looked at her and said with assurance, "Grace, have the best first day of school ever." And on cue, an adorable little boy next to her perked up and stated, "It's actually the second day of school." I was not winning. Without hesitation, I smiled. I remember taking a breath, exhaled, and felt a wave of peace come over me and replied, "Well, it's the first day for Grace." A message I needed to say, and specifically here on that day, which felt like failure. And a message for me today in camping out in the good of Grace that we need to offer ourselves. We need to offer our children, and they need to kindly offer it to us when we've reached our patience limit or get it wrong. Oh, that grace we need to offer them when they have forgotten the binder or their cleats that they need when we ask them when, right now. The goodness of laughing when the first day of school rolls around every year is big. That reminder is real to me. And if there ever was a time I needed the reminder that every day is a first day for grace, it was during my tenure at the Hot Topics table at The View. You see, working in live television is the equivalent of a politically correct minefield. I learned this the hard way. The potential of being misunderstood or saying something wrong, and the rate of that risk is high. The grace to be wrong enough about something to be right with someone came over time. For too long, I held so tightly to my positions with both hands, clinging to them. With that double-handed grip, you see, on what you believe, it's almost impossible to hold the hand of someone next to you. It came to me that we are to hold our beliefs with one hand and hold the hand of someone who holds a different set of beliefs from our own all the time. We are more meant to be right with one another in relationship, more than being right about everything. Every day is the first day of grace, an offering that leads to contenting. It's why to this day, Whoopi Goldberg and I are still able to be friends. Now, I think she's nuts, but she thinks I am too. But we hold hands, and I think for sure that's what God intends for us on this earth. See, contenting also requires leaning in. Oftentimes someone will ask me which task was more difficult, debating hot topics with Joy Behar for 10 years, or being on Survivor on the Australian outback for 39 days with no food, sleeping on the ground with 9 out of the 10 most deadly snakes in the world. Many days, the latter felt more manageable. Along with the pressure and high intensity, sparring over issues, there were glimmering moments too. I will never forget the day that the most beautiful envelope arrived in the mail. I actually brought you all a picture of this. I'm not sure if I was legally supposed to take one, but we won't share that. It was an invitation with a tassel, a wax seal, an invitation to the White House state dinner honoring the Queen of England on May 7th, 2007. That's real. At the time, we had a 2-year-old, and I was trying to keep life in order with work and pregnancy at the time. The invitation was intimidating, to be honest, and seemed very involved. At first, I truly didn't know what to do with it, and I didn't even feel worthy to receive it. After some thought, I deduced that I would take that fancy invitation to the fanciest person I knew. At the time, that was Barbara Walters. I knocked on her already open office door. The smell of morning coffee and light breakfast was in the air, and there was something I truly loved about being very close to Barbara Walters. She was the first to know anything that was happening in the world at the time. She was also the first to know what was happening to me when I would have a personal issue going on. She was the first to know when I was ready to have a child, and the first to know when Tim got a new job with a new team. I knew that whenever I had something to announce, I could and should go to her first. Partially out of respect, because she made my news seem as important as the latest global issue, and I'll always love that about Barbara. I explained the fancy invitation and my hesitation to travel, to grace a sitter, worried about leaving her for the first time since I had already messed up the first day of school. Barbara told me, "Darling, you must go." Those were her words. I explained again that it just seemed like a lot, Barbara, and I'd have to do so much planning to be ready for such a fancy night. "You must, darling. You must go," she insisted. "Well, how do I act in the presence of Her Majesty?" I asked her. "What do I wear? How do I greet her? Do I curtsy?" Barbara's smart, practical, certain, wise advice followed my stream of questions, as it usually did. Barbara leaned in. "Wear gloves and a pretty suit or dress. Nothing too revealing. Cover your shoulders with a jacket, perhaps, in case the room is cold. You are pregnant, darling, so know that you will be standing for quite some time, and make sure your shoes can withstand the evening. Eat before you go, as you will not want to be hungry with that baby inside of you. Tell Tim it is a white tie, so he needs to be in tails." I love that she was thinking about Tim. "This will be a formal event, so do whatever the Queen does first. Do not lift a glass until she lifts one. Do not stand until she stands." When Barbara finished, She emphasized again, just do whatever the Queen does. I repeated that advice in my mind for days. Just do whatever the Queen does. Just do whatever the Queen does. Got it. Well, we arrived at the White House, and I was surprised to find that the state dinner was much smaller than I initially thought. And every time we walked into a room, someone announced us. At one point, Tim and I got such a kick out of being announced, this was immature, that we would walk in and then out of a room and back in again just because that was fun. Just for effect. It was the most exquisite night I'd ever been a part of. Upon arriving, the President of the United States, First Lady Laura Bush, Queen Elizabeth, Prince Philip, and more, my mind went completely blank for the picture moment. I could not even remember nor recall how to greet them properly, so I ended up in something between a bow and a curtsy in front of the Queen. And following the formalities, we lined up and the photographer snapped this photo. That's real also. The guests at the table included Prince Charles, Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, the Queen's lady-in-waiting, which would be your very best friend forever and always, Governor Jeb Bush, and more. Lots of medals, lots of official titles, lots of perfect posture. I had been so nervous to be enough and look enough and be the part that I kept adding to my attire. If you look here closely, I have well, you can't see, but I put shoe clips on my shoes, and I then added shoe clips to my gloves, because that's not normal to put shoe clips on your gloves, but I thought I just needed more. I needed to be more worthy. And I wore my wedding cape because I thought, well, that's the most special thing I have, with custom buttons. And I'm looking at Jan Riven, and I know you like those buttons because you're a button girl. The entire evening, I kept my eye on the Queen, who was at the table just adjacent to me. Just as Barbara told me, I had my eyes on her, and I was pretty sure she had her eyes on me since that awkward curtsy moment. I continued to watch her. When Her Majesty stood, I stood. When Her Majesty sat, I sat. So far, so good, I concluded. I was not going to mess this up, or so I thought. I was pregnant. I was thirsty, and I was hungry. And I was growing tired, quite frankly, of playing the royal game of Mother May I. I recalled seeing an item on the menu described as a rose-infused something or other, and for whatever reason, that sounded perfectly refreshing at the time. A gold-etched bowl with a rosebud floating in it was placed right before me. Without hesitation, I picked up the bowl, and while the Queen was not looking, decided I was gonna gulp down that whole serving of rose-infused whatever water that was, and just as the bowl touched my lips, Governor Jeb Bush leaned in and over and said to me, you might not want to drink that. That's for your hands. There's really nothing I get right, okay? We'll just learn this. So just start writing that advice somewhere for me. Well, I could not put that fancy finger bowl down fast enough, and I'm fairly certain the Queen witnessed the whole thing. Governor Bush leaned in, without judgment, without scorn, and gently suggested that I might not want to drink the finger bowl water, and then just decided to let me do what I thought was best next. Now, do I tell this story about dinner with the Queen because it's so unthinkable that I was right there in that picture with the Queen of England, or because it's a lesson on how to drink or not drink fancy hand wash out of a finger bowl? No, I tell it because leaning in is also a pathway to contenting. I did not feel secure or calm enough in that state dinner until someone leaned in and cared enough to help. There was no contenting until someone made that difference, leaning in and made me feel at home, looked out after, and cared for. Leaning in is listening, learning, and being willing to get involved for the benefit of someone who needs it. I learned that night. Most of the time, leaning in is needed and can happen in ordinary moments in everyday life. We know this as moms. It's in the common places, in the common situations. Leaning in requires seeing people where they are and being willing to enter their space and their circumstances. Sometimes leaning in looks like simply letting people know that you're with them or you're praying for them. Sometimes it involves leaving your own comfort zone and stepping into someone else's discomfort. I know for sure this community does that well. Leaning in can mean letting someone into your own story, your journey, or your current pain. Leaning in looks like being present and encouraging one another. It means being a part of events and moments that speak life. Leaning in calls for conversation, not condemnation, and it looks a lot like love. Leaning in happens right here on this Montgomery Bell Academy campus, between moms like us with sons like ours. It happens because this school creates a table where leaning in to support one another is practiced. It looks like our headmaster, Brad Gioia, leaning into the sacred space, honoring Ebony and Everton Heron's request to pray scripture over their son, Jackson Francis, for a miraculous healing. It looks like a school community receiving an email from Brad to gather and act on that request during the Titans game in overtime, leaving homes in this surrounding community and making their way on foot to the Burkholder Center to come together. Leaning and letting Jackson and his family know that this is a community that could be counted on. Leaning in at MBA looks like our headmaster reaching out to all of you and our alumni in Atlanta when Jackson was transferred to Shepherd, and our community of moms and alumni leaning in to do whatever we could for a fellow Montgomery Bell Academy student and brother. The atmosphere here has given me the blessing of friendship with Ebony because the school family is one that encourages leaning in and leaning on and connecting. I've had conversations today already with moms that I've learned to love in 5 minutes because we know we have a history and shared thread here at this school. Up close, I saw a mom leaning into the arms of that school and a response from its leader to make sure they were indeed surrounded by all of you. I am so thankful that we are mothers who lean in and know that we can lean on one another in this wonderful, incredible, compassionate, ready-to-act community. Thank you for being moms that lean in. I am absolutely contenting in that. So dinner with the Queen was a stretch for me. Walking onto my college softball team was a stretch for me. Trying to win Survivor in the Australian Outback when I had never camped before was a stretch for me. Getting into television, having zero experience prior to being a shoe designer at Puma was a stretch for me. Interviewing Presidents Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, 5-star generals, and the Israeli Prime Minister was a stretch for me. Stretching is significant. Before we go, I'll share one story. I learned even more about why stretching is significant from a friend named Bob. Bob and his awesome wife, Maria, came over for a visit one day, and they brought our boys and Grace slingshots. I was fine with him giving Grace the slingshot, but we know we have boys. That's a bad idea to bring slingshots inside. We know this because we're moms of boys. It's not a good idea. Well, Bob immediately, upon gifting the boys this indoor weapon and destruction piece, said, "Watch them." And I said, "Oh, you better know that I am watching them." And sure enough, they started just slingshotting things around our house. They wanted to launch bigger and bigger things. Started with an innocent ping pong ball, all of a sudden an Oreo, then a clementine. Whatever they could sling, they were deciding to launch in our family room. Somehow I'm still friends with Bob. What became evident to me in that moment was that we're actually made to launch big things. These boys are made to launch. Academically, in serving one another in relationships, in time management, in character, in heart, in brotherhood, our young men are being stretched and have been stretched. I'm looking out at all of you. We share this connection because we know, and I'm only 2 years in, we know our boys are being stretched here and have been into men. And physics will tell us the degree of stretch directly affects launch. In our hearts as moms, we have stretched so that we can be ready to launch them well and far. We stretch our hearts for one another. We stretch out giving back to the school. We stretch our arms out to one another so that we can launch hope, launch love, and reach others around us well. Ektenos, a Greek term, means earnestly, fervently, constantly, properly, fully stretched, extended out to its necessary full potential. It is the root word for English terms like tension and tense. Your sons and mine are launching into their full potential right now, where they are in the world, because they have been given the opportunity to earnestly stretch. Today I will leave you with the hope in the word contenting. Because they have been stretched, they have significant reach because they're ready to launch. Contenting in the truth that this can always be the first day for grace. Contenting in a community that leans in, and contenting in an opportunity to stretch, launch, and reach like never before. Thank you, Mr. Gioia, once more for having me today, and for all of you for letting me share this time with you. I stand with admiration that you've done this well. I ask that you just do send me some notes of encouragement and direction for the rest of my time here. I've never had a high school boy before, so I am all ears. God bless you all, and have a wonderful and safe summer. Thank you.
What a beautiful message about listening to other people, trying to have a conversation and not trying to just condemn them because they have a different point of view. I appreciate that immensely.